All right, hello, and welcome back to another week here on the Broad Market Overview. So, I really appreciate you guys, whoever watched the previous one. It ended up going quite a lot longer than I had expected. It was around 30 minutes or so. I had a blast, but now I feel like you know, want to speed through it a little bit more, and I feel like I have a lot more clarity on what I want to talk about. Really, what I want to focus on is the narratives and kind of just going over what different narratives are we're seeing right now. So first of all, let's start with the top of the market, U.S. market, S&P 500. Let's take a look. Not much to say. Once again, on the weekly, we're still having this massive contraction phase after our huge expansion phase post-April breakdown. If we look on the daily, it's really just chop. There's just nothing happening here. This is continues to be a 3% range, which on the S&P even is quite contracted. So not much to say there. The Qs have been moving down a little bit lower, so they're doing not as good as the SPY. IWM continues to go sideways / up, so not much to say there. This is still moving up. Most likely, this will continue to either move sideways or up in the future. I can imagine that if SPY moves up, IWM will actually go sideways or down a little bit and retest its 20-week moving average. If you look at the daily, it's really just slowly moves, losing a little bit of momentum, it seems like. Gold, once again, looking pretty strong. So last week we talked about this potential of a rising triangle, which did eventually actually break down, which I thought maybe it could break up and then break down. Looks like it actually did break down a little bit. But overall, this is still looking quite good. It just looks like it's kind of going sideways. It reminds me a lot of this, where it was like it had a big move and then it came off pretty aggressively. That was like a 10% drop, which is decent. And then it just proceeded to go sideways. Like, it didn't break up immediately, but what happened was it went through another contraction phase. You can see with the Bollinger Bands in the background. That's basically the daily Bollinger Bands. So this went through a huge daily Bollinger Band squeeze. If we actually go up to the weekly, we might have seen that. Yeah, so it was most likely right there. That's where that squeeze happened. So this was actually a squeeze that ended up resulting in a 37% move, even if you bought the breakout. So if you didn't get the perfect entry down here, this ended up being a 37% move. So this is something that this could totally just go sideways for the next. If the moving average kind of continues to move up here, it could go sideways for the next, 62 days. So 2 to 3 months, honestly. It could go sideways before it even gets near the 20-week moving average. So this thing could go sideways for 2 to 3 months essentially and just still be bullish. So really, I think this is the high to watch. Obviously, this is the high to watch. Like, if we can get, confidently move up there, like basically teleport, kind of like we did here. Obviously, it's going to move up higher, but really, I'd be watching this because obviously that's a bit, closer to where price is. Most likely, if it goes above it, it'll come back down. But I think it'll be interesting to watch the price action there and see kind of how that goes. So next week we'll revisit this and we'll see what's up. So I'm just going to leave that there and leave a little drawing as a comment for myself. So we'll see how that pans out. All right, silver, classic kind of move, huge move up, huge breakdown, not really recovering very well. Maybe this squeezes up, I know there's a lot of people that are buying the short silver, the bear short silver ETFs. So maybe we get something like, a move up like that, or I guess I should say that, something like that, moving up. These kind of markets love to fake people out. A good example is on Bitcoin. This one actually got me a long time ago. Was post this move. If we want a higher time frame, it actually might be clearer. Post this move, it looked terrible. It looked like it was just going to bleed down and continue bleeding down. And then what happened was we just got a huge short squeeze and we went up. And so I can imagine this kind of thing happening on silver as well. I don't think it'll put in a new high though. I don't see that happening anytime soon. I think the silver trade is quite different than the gold trade. All right, I bet Bitcoin continue to make new lows. Nothing new here. Once again, if you are a Bitcoin bull, I suggest buying some because it's a relatively good price related to the 200-week moving average. It just continues to be a buy. So yeah, XLE keeps on moving up. So we've had a great Great move up so far. Continuing bullish expansion, continuing spending price. Price is spending plenty of time outside of the upper Bollinger Band, meaning that it's trading on the weekly time frame above 2 standard deviations from the 20-week moving average. So that's what this is showing, is that its price is closing outside of these Bollinger Bands, as you can see here visually. Last week was a decent candle close. It wasn't anything special, but this week we had a little bit of a sell down, which, we had a couple days down, which really is nothing. But still looking very strong. Most likely we'll have some sort of pullback here, the 20-day moving average here pretty soon. But still very, very bullish on this position. Very excited about it. So we'll see where that goes. I actually went ahead and broke down the positioning into multiple. I didn't buy the ETF. I've never bought the ETF. So I was originally in Chevron. I wasn't very diversified. I kind of wish I was. So what I did was, on this day, just after earnings, which wasn't intentional actually, not after earnings, sorry, after the dividend. It was the day the dividend was finalized, meaning that, I will be getting this dividend. I didn't intentionally do that, but I ended up selling most of my holdings, actually 60%, I think, or 70%, in order to rebalance into some other holdings that are in XLE. So I'm not buying the ETF of XLE. I buy, kind of the companies I think are going to do the best, or that have been performing the best relative to the move. ExxonMobil has been doing by far the best. So if we go since 2026, year to date, ExxonMobil is up, 25%. Chevron, year to date, is up, oh my gosh, why is this so broken? The fuck? Wow. Is up 21%, so a little bit better. TPL, Texas Pacific Land Corporation, is a company that I was actually watching way back here. I never was able to buy any, but it's been an extremely bullish company, and so I just have another signal on this, and it's, it may not be the best time to have bought, but I think considering that this is 10% of my holdings in this trade, it's it's pretty good, I think. So as long as the XLE trade, because this is in XLE, as long as the XLE trade continues to be strong, then I will continue to be in these types of plays. DVN as well, another one that just looks like it's expanding. If we go to the weekly, it's got this similar kind of contraction. It's not nearly as obvious, and it's obviously been in a bear trend since 2022. So this could very well be the top, kind of similar to here, but I figured I'd diversify a little bit, put a little bit in there, and then TRGP is looking amazing. It's a new all-time high on this company, and then COP is another one that looks like it potentially could move up to 140. So pretty big move. We're talking a 40% move, or 37%ish move, 30% move. We're talking. So pretty good on those. So that's kind of where I'm at with XLE. I don't buy the ETF. I buy some of the best performing components of the ETF, usually weighting heavier to the higher weighted companies, because they're weighted by market cap usually. SMH semis continue to hold a bid. I feel like this is one of the big things that's actually holding up the SPY. I don't actually have data on that. I would like to get some data on that, so maybe I can kind of address that this week, and maybe in the next video we'll be able to do that. I'll showcase that. TLT, people have been talking about how TLT has been getting a bit of a bid. I don't really see it. This to me is just chop. Is it going down more? Not particularly, but it's just kind of, not really doing much. Continue to keep an eye on it. Things could get interesting, like I said, if, we get above these highs. Let's say if we get above 92, we could, I don't think anything's going to happen. The thing is, this thing is so different compared to most assets that the types of people that are going to rush into this are not the types that are not traditionally retail. So I feel like you have to take this with a grain of salt with how this trades. DIA, the Dow Jones, continuing to just move up very, very confidently. XLF, we had a pretty big sell-off last couple weeks in XLF, which is the financial sector. And one of those stocks, for example, was Schwab. I was watching this for a long time and wanting to buy some. In fact, in a way, this actually kind of hit my signal, because it was contracted here, and then there was expansion. But I just didn't take the trade on this because it just didn't fit my system as well as I would like. It technically qualified, but it wasn't a type of setup that I personally liked when I looked at it. And then it went up, and I was kind of like, I wasn't bummed that I didn't buy, but I was like, whatever, like, it's just going to continue going up. And then we had this random day where it just, absolutely tanked shit. The narrative behind why this went down is essentially that, the whole AI narrative is that any companies that just make exorbitant fees for doing things that, for example, like money management that might be able to actually be done by AI better and cheaper, what's the point of these companies that take big fees, And I mean, if you look at their earnings, like, yeah, this is, one of the first earnings misses they've had since, 2023, since their Q4, essentially. So, there is something to be said about this. I would still be bullish this company. I think that's kind of noise. I mean, they are trading, on a relative value, or not relative value, but on a mean reversion kind of basis. They are trading pretty high up. But, I mean, I think you already had, like, other cities, other kind of corporate stocks in the financial sector that are trading down a little bit. I think also BRKL or BRLK or Interactive Brokers, IBRK. Interactive Brokers, RRBK. Damn it. Interactive. Yeah, IBKR. God damn, man. I can never remember that one. That one sold off a little bit, but then we got a bid. I think this was the sell-off, and then we got a bid on it as well. So this is still a very good one. But I'm not touching any of this stuff right here just because I just don't really, I just don't have a setup for it. XLK Technology. This one's been holding decently. Very contracted as well. Not much to say there. IGV, interestingly, is there's been some data coming out that retail's actually been buying IGV or institutions have been going really, really heavily short. And I think you can see that with the volume here. There's just been a lot of volume traded. I would not expect this thing to trade much lower than slightly below. Not even that low, honestly. Like, I wouldn't expect this thing to trade much lower than slightly below. Kind of like how it did here. It's 200-week moving average. I don't personally want to touch this because I just don't. The narrative to me just doesn't seem like. I think this whole to me it's just like a relative value play, or no, it's not the relative value play. It's like buying the laggard because you think at some point it'll come up, it'll rebound, and I'd rather play something like SMH. I'd rather wait for a good buy on SMH because this thing is just tore, and you could say at some point SMH might look like IGV, but to me. The tech trade, my gut is telling me that the tech trade is kind of falling off because AI is disrupting so much. I mean, AI really is Internet 2.0, so I don't want to be taking things for granted, like the idea that tech stocks like Microsoft are just going to, rebound. And also, Palantir is in that IGV ETF. So for me, it's also like I'm not particularly bullish on Palantir, and Microsoft, two stocks that I'm not very bullish on, are making up 20% of IGV alone. So yeah, gold miners continue to look strong, just like gold. XLP, pretty bearish candle on Tuesday, so we kind of sold off. There was a big hype in the narrative. I could totally see this thing cooling off, especially because one of the biggest holdings is Walmart, and Walmart just, if we go on the monthly and take off logarithmic, this thing just looks very tired. We're having, higher high in price, but Bollinger Bands are contracting, meaning that we're actually having contraction in the aggressiveness of the move on a monthly time frame. This thing has been going up since 2015, so this could be a macro top, kind of like this. So, and XLP is kind of made up heavily by this. It's also made up heavily by Costco, which, Costco did have an amazing run in 2024, but it did rebound, I think, because the whole sector of consumer discretionary, or consumer staples, I should say, were doing well. But to me, this chart, I really wanted to buy Costco, and this kind of gave me a reason to buy it, but to me it's just I don't like how this looks. This kind of looks like a dead cat bounce to me, before we head at least to here. I don't necessarily I'm not super bearish on this, but I just don't expect this thing to go all the way back up to new highs. I just don't expect that. So this is what I'm expecting. And that paired with Walmart going down, or topping at least, or going sideways, I just feel like this trade is a little too crowded, and there's not a ton of reason XLU utilities doing a little bit worse than I expected. I feel like the fact that utilities are going down and XLE is actually continuing to go up is actually very interesting. I think that really shows how strong XLE is with the bid for these companies. And also, I believe that, I don't actually know a lot about it, but I believe that Iran is trying to declare war. I don't know on who, I'm not paying attention to it, but that will obviously be most likely good for the narrative, at least around oil and energy and stuff like that. So we'll see. I'm going to keep an eye on that. It really doesn't make a difference for my trade, but I think it's interesting to pay attention to. ARK is one that I've been watching for, honestly, a little bit over a week now. I'm very excited for the potentialness of this. This just looks like the kind of setup that's like, you have a big move up, you put in a low, you go up, you put in a low, and then you sweep the low. Now, it hasn't traded up just yet. Like, it's kind of still figuring out if it wants to chop around or go lower. But to me, this is like a really good, line in the sand. Like, this, this just looks like a very clear line if we just look at it visually. Like, you can see there's resistance and support. Now, you can debate whether or not resistance or support are real things. You totally can. But for me, this just looks like something that has the potential to put in a bottom here. So for me, it's like if price can confidently close above like 70 on a weekly basis, then I want to get in this trade, and then it'll be basically targeting new highs with a stop loss at the low. Could be wrong, even if I get a signal, if it goes up here, it could very well go back down. But to me, it's just like, I'm of the opinion that this is a decent setup, and the SPY, the majors are gonna make a decision. They might go down, they might go up, but I want to be positioned in something decent. I'm not going to risk a lot on this. I'm going to risk about 1% of my portfolio, which is much smaller than I usually risk on a trade that's like on the weekly time frame. But to me, it's just like, okay, well, if I'm risking 1%, for 4R, it means I'm potential gain of 4%, and then I could close half of it at the high, and then hold the rest of it as it maybe goes to 130, which would be like double. I mean, if we pulled it all the way here to new highs, that would be almost a 1.5x. So I'm really looking at this. A lot of the stocks that are in here, are stocks that I think, if we go to ARK holding list, we got Tesla, we got Crisp, Tempest AI, Roku, whatever. Shopify's actually in there. I didn't know that. Robinhood, of course. I feel like Robinhood's gonna do decent. So I would just keep an eye on this. I feel like Robinhood is near a bottom. If anything, it's probably just gonna, I don't think it's gonna put it in a high anytime soon, but because this is a pretty aggressive sell-off. But I am bullish on Robinhood going long term. And Palantir is in here, but it's only 3%, which is really nice. So a lot of weird stocks in here. Honestly, a very, very weird basket. But, I feel like Tesla is kind of the main one, and Shopify as well. Shopify is an amazing company. They continue to grow quarter over quarter. AI, in my opinion, is not going to ruin their company. Knowing how the founder runs the company, it seems like they are going to be AI first in terms of kind of how they do everything, and trying to pass that savings on to the and that benefit and power onto the end user, the people that use Shopify to run their business. So overall, very bullish on that. Tesla, a lot of people have been talking about this idea of kind of a cup and handle. I was pretty bullish on Tesla up at the highs. I didn't buy any, but a lot of people are talking about this kind of a cup and handle idea. I don't know if that's really going to play out. In fact, if it does play out, it's probably only going to be like a 40% move, if that, So I wouldn't be banking on it too much, but I do think it's interesting. My system technically had a signal to buy here, which I'm glad I didn't, because I would be flat holding it for the last 7 months or whatever. But I still think this thing overall is going to go up. Not super bullish on the actual fundamentals of the company, but I think that the fact that it is one of the largest holdings in ARK, I already think Tesla's chart looks decent, and ARK itself looks good, or potentially good. It's one to keep on the watch list. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. If you have any questions or anything you want me to look at, please feel free to leave some comments. I'm always happy to take suggestions of stuff to look at and we'll go from there. And next week, maybe I'll have some new cool stuff to show you that's not on TradingView. All right. Take it easy and have a good week.